Nexus PMG welcomes you to the Bigger Than Us podcast, which we as energy geeks lovingly refer to as the BTU. Bigger Than Us is a podcast that focuses on ideas that will shape the future of our planet and ultimately our existence. We will occasionally lean into energy topics because, after all, it's the key to our collective survival. But we'll also explore other ideas and topics that we believe will have an impact that is bigger than us. And now, on to today's show. Hello, and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Veeral Hardev to the show. Veeral Hardev is VP of Strategy at Ubiquitous Energy. Hardev has over a decade of experience commercializing novel nanomaterials products for the electronics industry. This includes his time at Nanosys Inc., where he led materials and business development and product management. Hardev holds an MBA from the Berkeley Haas School of Business and a bachelor's degree in material science and economics from UCLA. Veeral, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, Raj. Thanks for asking. I hope you're doing well, and just excited to be here today to chat with you a little bit.
Veeral, I'm very excited to speak with you too. Sounds like a phenomenal technology you guys have at Ubiquitous Energy. Before we do, though, and it's my job to do background research on my guests, and I want to start here. You have a certification in, I'm going to say, confident, assertive, and in charge, developing the attitudes of leadership. What inspired you to take that course?
Oh, really good question. I think what really inspired me really is around kind of public speaking and showing confidence in kind of whatever you're talking about or whatever you're discussing. And going back to business school, one of the mantras we had there was trying to develop people who are leaders who kind of show that confidence without having an arrogance or an ego about them. It's more of just be confident in one, who you are, and then second, that what you're describing or talking about or educating on, because you are an expert in kind of what you know.
So, give us a tip. How do you be confident in who you are?
Yeah, really good question. That's a hard one, right? I mean, I think that's personal for a lot of people. For some people, it's kind of doing some kind of routine to hype themselves up. Like before, if they're about to take the stage to do something, or to give a presentation. For others, it's just really practicing the heck out of it, and so they know whatever they're going to talk about or speak about or present about, backwards, for front, back. They could do it in their sleep, if you will. For others, it's imagining. One of the really old things about public speaking was have fun. Imagine your audience is sitting there in their underwear, right? So it's there could be a number of things, right? But I think for me personally, it's just not being worried of all the things that could potentially go wrong. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, right? Well, you get so nervous or anxious about what if, right? And if you go down that path, that's not going to be a very good path. So it's, again, to me, it's more of just be confident in yourself and just have fun with it.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I'd like to add one other thing that I've heard also is that if you focus on delivering value to the audience, then it shifts the focus from you to them.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Now, are you aware that Warren Buffett has been asked many times what his best investment ever was? Do you know the answer to that question?
I know I've read it, but I don't know off the top of my head.
He said it was Dale Carnegie training in public speaking.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one that I've done for sure.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. So
No
I
problem.
mentioned Ubiquitous Energy at the beginning of the show. Can you give the audience an overview of Ubiquitous Energy and your role at the organization?
Yeah, no problem. Great. So Ubiquitous Energy is a startup company that spun out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, about a decade ago. And the concept and the vision was quite simple. It was really to develop and commercialize a transparent solar technology. And when we mean transparent, it's virtually invisible. So it's something that you can apply to almost any surface without changing that surface's look or appearance. And so that's really what the company is all about. I'm more than happy to jump into it. Of course, into exactly what we're up to. It's quite exciting. And my role here is I've been with the company for about 6 years now, and my title is vice president of strategy. But really, for me, what that means is really helping to lead our efforts in business development and marketing and partnerships to help get this technology out to the market.
I would really appreciate to hear some of the use cases.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, think about a renewable energy technology that you could apply anywhere that you wouldn't even know was there, but it's giving you that benefit of creating and generating, clean and renewable energy. And that's kind of our real mission and kind of focus with our technology. Again, I refer to it as a transparent solar technology. And so when you think about that, you could start to think about many, many things, right? And they're all things that are probably pretty valid, right, in terms of areas or applications where we could apply our technology. So I can talk about several of them, right? So one right off the bat is, if you look at buildings or homes and you look at the sides of buildings, especially in downtown areas, urban areas where you have really tall buildings, skyscrapers, right? Most of the time, those are just glass, right? Glass facades, as they're called, right? All around the building. So what if we could apply our technology to those surface areas so that, again, it doesn't change the look or appearance or the aesthetic of that glass or those windows, but now with our technology applied to it, we can actually create renewable energy harvested from sunlight, just in the way similarly as traditional solar panels do, but of course do it in a way that's non-obtrusive or without impacting aesthetics. So windows is obviously a big one, whether it's for commercial buildings, residential buildings, apartment buildings, or homes. But then also, other areas where you have windows or glass, right? So what's, one that comes to mind right away, especially in our day and age with, autonomous and electric vehicles, is obviously automotive. So we think we can, eventually apply our technology to automotive, to the windshield, to the side lights, to the sunroof, eventually to the body of the car. Again, not taking away or changing the way the design or the look and the feel of the car is or the automobile is, but adding this value added benefit that now we can actually create renewable energy from the whole surface of the car. So beyond that, we could think about other devices that we kind of interact with, and we kind of joke internally and we say, we want to apply our technology to every surface, right? And so it's like, well, it's not every surface, right? It's not going to be like on the interior of your bathroom floor or anything, right? But it's surfaces we talk about as surfaces you interact with every day, right? So people look in and out of their window, whether it's at home or their building or their office every day. Most people do get into an automobile at some point, probably every day or every other day or pretty frequently. And then what else? Consumer electronics, right? I mean, who is not literally attached, to their mobile devices now, right? I mean, obviously there's a negative side to that, but on the positive side, there's a lot of productivity, we all get from having mobile devices. So, what if we could apply our technology to these mobile devices, whether it's your cell phone, your iPhone, your tablet, your computer, and if you're just sitting outside, getting some nice sunshine and enjoying yourself, your devices could be trickle charging without you even knowing it with our technology embedded into the glass or the display of those devices. There's a lot more. The last one I'll kind of leave you with here is agriculture, right? Especially as a lot of work is going on in terms of sustainable food sources and efficient farming and things like this. Getting greenhouses, we believe, to be completely independent in terms of their consumption and need for electricity, potentially with our technology, is an area that we're pretty excited about. So by applying our technology to the greenhouse, you could have a greenhouse that literally just operates itself. It doesn't need to be connected to the electrical grid or get its power from somewhere else.
Those are all great use cases and sounds like you have a huge addressable market. You mentioned earlier you're a startup. Where have you decided to start out? Which market and why?
Yeah, really good question. Probably, as you know, maybe from some of the discussions you've had and some of the things I try to preach here, not only at our company, but others that I know is, is really focusing. And I think that's where your question really is getting to. You're right. We have a tremendous opportunity. We believe with our technology, a number of different places we can apply to. But we're not naive. We are small. We're not going to be able to do everything all at the same time. So we do got to focus our efforts, and kind of where we decided to focus our efforts is really in the window space. Windows for both residential buildings and for commercial buildings. And there's a couple of reasons we decided to have that focus. One, from a business perspective, is that we believe that's probably our largest addressable market segment when we think about our technology in all these different places, like I've talked about in terms of whether it's agriculture, consumer electronics, automotive, or windows, or another terminology you could use for that is just architectural glass in general. So there's a market and financial part of that decision. The other part of that decision is really, we believe that's where our technology can have the biggest impact. And what I mean by that is impact, from a global climate perspective, in terms of how, by incorporating our technology, can we make buildings and homes in general just much more energy efficient, and surfaces that create renewable energy, so helping to offset carbon emissions. Some analysis we've done, to give you an example of the impact we could have on buildings alone, is that we could offset up to 10% of global carbon emissions just by incorporating our technology into windows that are sold all around the world already. So there's the impact, and then there's the value, right? There's tremendous value, we believe, in integrating our technology into window products that is hopefully going to be seamless and convenient, not only for the consumer, but the people who actually do the construction to install and build these buildings and these windows. We believe there's a really big impact we could have there to integrate a technology like ours that is, you could call it new or next generation, but have it made and manufactured in a way that is going to be seamless for that whole customer experience. And then on the value side, now that we're able to generate renewable electricity or energy from these window surfaces, we're looking at all kinds of things that, what could you do with that energy? Obviously, for, one thing you could do is you could net meter it and send it back to the grid or sell it back to the grid. Another thing we think is a little bit more intelligent to do at the onset is really you could start to drive other functions and features, right at the window, whether that's, sensors, or other electronic appliances, whether that's a lighting, and those kind of things. So, we think of our technology as being integrated in a way that not only makes financial sense, makes an impact, for carbon emissions and climate, but also brings this tremendous value to the consumer or the owner of the building, whether it's a home or a commercial building, again, in terms of making their whole building system operate more efficiently and effectively.
Now, you mentioned construction earlier. Are you looking to target retrofitting or new build?
Yeah, really good question. We will likely target new construction at the very beginning. That said, we are actively exploring ways that we can integrate our technology into existing buildings. As you probably know, more than half of the market that is out there are buildings that are already there. And, with the pandemic, global construction did take a little bit of a hit, but by most forecast and expert predictions, that's expected to rebound, right? But that doesn't mean that existing buildings are really going away. I saw some stat the other day that said 90% of the buildings that exist in New York City will still exist by the year 2050. So that means, anything that we're doing to again make an impact globally with our technology, we're going to have to address this retrofit and renovation market. But again, as a small company, we're not naive. We can't be doing everything all at once. And so we're kind of focusing on that new construction side for the most part, but hopefully quickly following into the retrofit and renovation market.
Speaking of the number of buildings, I think I've heard recently that they're actually estimating that the number of buildings is set to double in the next 20 to 30 years.
That's right.
Now, doing some research, I found that from energy consumption standpoint, buildings, three main issues. One is how much glass is on a building, so they call it the glazing ratio. Second is how airtight it is, and third is insulation. So from a glass on the side of the building, and I don't remember the person that said it, but to quote them roughly, it says the best glass performs as about as good as the worst walls. So I thought it was a very interesting comment. How does your glass or your product perform from I guess, from an efficiency standpoint?
Yeah, really good question. And yeah, this unfortunately has been a fairly controversial topic, but I think the education is getting out there now that, there's technology that exists with glazing and new windows that the thermal insulation performance side of things is almost as good as like a concrete wall. And there's the different scientific metrics in terms of U value and R value and those kind of things. But instead of boring your audience, I won't get into that. But I will address, the three things that you brought up, right? So the glazing ratio, right? So another way to think about this is what most designers and architects call the window to wall ratio. How much of your surface of your side of the building is made up of glazing or window or glass area. So there's a ratio, right? So if it's 40% or 50%, that's just basically how much amount of glass you have. So the challenge here has been, this battle, right? This battle between creating buildings that are energy efficient, and then on the design standpoint, people love glass, right? People love these big buildings that are just 100% glazed, or what we call curtain wall buildings, which literally the whole side of the building is just glass. So everybody loves the design and look of that. Architects love it, and then you have this battle about, well, that's probably not the most energy efficient building, right? One of the developers jokingly has told me, if I was in the energy, if that's the only thing I cared about, I would just build concrete buildings with no windows. But, there's not many people out in the world, joking aside, that want to live in such a structure, right?
Yeah, they're called prisons, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So on the glazing ratio side, our technology brings value from a couple of different ways. So let me take a moment here to explain this. Our technology, it can be considered like a solar panel, right? So what does a solar panel do? It takes light energy from sunlight, converts some amount of that into useful electricity. And so the kind of way by the law of physics, that process works is really well understood and known, right? And so there's different things you can do to change that solar panel in terms of changing certain materials and things like this to affect performance. So what literally our technology is doing is we're doing the same exact thing, right? Our technology is transparent in that it's receiving the same amount of sunlight and it's converting some of that into useful electricity. The trick is we're not absorbing what's known as visible light energy to do this. And so that's how we can make our technology look virtually invisible or completely transparent, but it's still effective. And it's effective because it's still absorbing a lot of the light energy that's in the non-visible part of the spectrum, what we kind of typically refer to as ultraviolet light energy and infrared light energy. And so by doing this, we can create a device, again, that's like a solar panel. It's receiving sunlight, it's converting some of that into electricity, but we're on purpose letting transmit or pass through all of that visible light. So to me and you and to most humans who see visible color, it looks completely transparent because, we don't see that ultraviolet like birds do, and we don't see that infrared like other animals do. And so by doing this, we're able to create a technology or a window product that looks just like a traditional window. We're not changing the way it looks in terms of aesthetics, color, transparency level. But now that window is turning somewhat from a passive surface into a dynamic surface. We're actually creating an electrically functioning window, right? That's generating renewable energy. At the same time, on the insulation side of things, we're rejecting or inhibiting that ultraviolet light energy and infrared light energy from passing through the window. And that's really important from a thermal optical standpoint, because everybody can probably relate to this, right? Like if you're sitting in your car and it's sunny outside and you sit there without the AC on, after a certain time, you start to get really hot, right? And what's happening is the infrared light energy from the sunlight is passing right through that glass and hitting you. And after a certain time, it starts to get really uncomfortable. So what the window in the glass industry has done, they've developed basically what are metal oxide coatings that go right onto the glass that is commonly referred to as low E or low emissivity. And so essentially what they've done is by adding these metal oxide thin layers of coatings onto the glass, they essentially have created an infrared light energy reflector. So instead of that light energy passing through the glass in the window, it basically gets reflected back out to the world. So our technology is doing something similar, but as opposed to reflecting that light energy back out to the world, we're actually capturing it and harnessing it to create, usable electricity. So that's how it helps on the insulation side. And then going back to the glazing ratio, we've heard from so many designers and architects that you're giving us that design freedom back to create these buildings with more glazing ratio or higher window to wall ratio, which is what we always want to do. But we've been up against it because there's this battle about creating something that's really, really efficient and then limiting how much glass or surface area you could have. So by the combination of, the renewable energy and the superior thermal insulation standpoint, we're actually able to enable essentially these designers and architects to use more glazing area or glazing surface, increasing the window to wall ratio so that you can actually create, 100% glazed buildings or curtain wall buildings that are highly energy efficient. And in terms of airtight, your third point, on the different things that you look at for windows, we really don't impact the air tightness because our technology is essentially a coating that goes right onto the surface of the glass. And then the rest of the window construction and process is the same as it is done today. So what we do is we just apply our coating just like the glass industry today, as I mentioned, applies these metal oxide coatings. Of course, we have a different way of doing it so that we can create a transparent solar energy, generating device right on the surface of the glass. But then the rest of the manufacturing process, supply chain process, exactly the same. It still gets made into a window that's framed and then glazed, whether that's into a residential building or a commercial building. And so, from that standpoint, we don't really, improve, I would say, that air tightness or that quality, but we don't take away or detract from it either. And so, when you look at those three metrics, we think we're making a really positive impact to the glazing ratio and the insulation performance. And then the air tightness is the air tightness that exists, today. We believe that, this is a really good solution.
So, speaking of developers, designers, architects, so much of what they have to do is driven by CapEx, ROI. How are you enrolling them to, be on board for a solution like yours?
Yeah, really good question. It's one thing I'll say up front, it's not easy, right? For different folks, they have different thoughts and different wants, right? So for some developers, their main focus is to get the building built as fast as they can, so they can go and sell it, right? And so for them, they're not really concerned about the ongoing kind of operational cost, if you will, from a building maintenance standpoint. So for them, the challenge is even harder to prove to them that there's enough value by adopting our technology or window products with our technology that it's going to be worth their while. However, what they're starting to understand now is that by incorporating, technologies like ours into the building itself, they're able to reap some benefits. And so, certain things like, by meeting certain energy efficient codes, whether it's, a building or regulatory mandated kind of thing that minimum they have to meet or need, we obviously help with that. But then on the other side of things, in terms of a marketability of the building, in terms of, the general energy performance, by different accreditation, right? So things like, LEED performance. And so, I pick on LEED because that's the most well-known and most thought of kind of building energy kind of metric or rating system, right? And so, by using our technology alone, we can really help buildings go from a certain level of LEED performance or accreditation to the next level. And it can have a really big impact for the building owner, even if they're going to, develop it and then sell the building, because with a higher performing LEED building, you're able to attract a higher, financial return for that developer for selling that building, right? For building such a high performing building. And then on the other hand, from a long-term ownership standpoint, obviously we're reducing the amount of energy consumption you need. We're, creating and harnessing renewable energy right at the building site. which is going to start getting, we believe, built into the code. That's going to mandate that, you're going to have certain renewable energy technologies on site. And it's really difficult to employ or deploy traditional renewable energy technologies into most buildings because of either aesthetics or space concerns. And so, again, people want glass and people want more windows. So we're not asking for any more, physical real estate on the building to employ our technology. And then finally, for the value for the developer or building owner that's going to keep their building long term, it's in the higher rent, it's in the higher lease amounts, right? More and more, and studies are showing this, companies and people are starting to look at buildings and select, where they're going to live or where they're going to work in terms of the building energy performance or energy efficiency, right? So if all things are equal, are you more likely to want to live and work in a building that's higher rated in terms of its energy performance versus one that's not? And so what we're seeing, and what a lot of real estate companies are putting out some studies showing, that with higher energy performing buildings and higher LEED accreditation, the building owners are actually able to attract and keep much higher rent and lease rates, which obviously is a direct financial impact positively back to the developer or building owner that's, again, making that decision of, whether to, use this kind of window products that have these technologies or not.
Now, you mentioned financial impact. I'm not going to hold you to it, but what is the difference in price between, let's just call it, a regular window and one of your products?
Yeah, really good question, Raj. And yeah, it's a really important one. From our perspective, again, we're looking at this from a global and, big mission, big vision perspective. So we don't have ambitions for this to be, your kind of like the Cadillac type of window, right? That only a certain select people can afford or certain buildings can afford. We want this technology to be widely available. We want it to be
Ubiquitous?
We want it to be ubiquitous. Exactly right. Yeah, you stole my line there. But honestly, we don't want this to be so expensive that it's not going to be adopted, right? So we want this to be as close to either on par or just above par as a traditional window. And we're not out there yet, but we're going to be there soon. Manufacturing our products or window products with our technology, and so we want to hit a price point that's, or a cost, from a cost perspective, that's a marginal incremental addition to what you get with traditional windows. And the range that we're in is about 20 to 30% premium versus your traditional window. And we have all types of analysis that we've done internally and with consultants and with accredited institutions, from a third party perspective, to show the kind of a financial analysis, if you will, or the ROI or the payback, right? By incorporating our technology at that 20 to 30% premium versus traditional windows or traditional products, and what kind of impact not only does that have from an energy efficiency standpoint, energy generation standpoint, but as an ongoing kind of savings. And it's quite dramatic. It's quite compelling.
20 to 30% doesn't sound bad at all, considering the ROI on the energy you can capture on the other end.
That's exactly right. And so, oftentimes we get into, discussions around with some people, oh, isn't it just better for me to put, traditional solar panels out in my car parking lot or on my rooftop because, it's pretty cheap, it's coming from China, the price of the materials have come down. And so, we don't disagree that, you should do that. Our take is that, our technology is here not to replace traditional technologies like, silicon panels and other material that are, your traditional solar panels. We're here to help, right? We see ourselves as being a complement potentially to these technologies. And so, what we always say kind of simply is, if you like traditional technologies, like traditional solar technologies, and you have areas you can put them in without it disrupting what your requirements are, whether it be from a financial perspective or aesthetic perspective, go do it. But if you have windows in your structure anywhere, why not use our windows? Because by using both, you're going to just get much better performance out of it as a combination.
Well, you might be unknowingly helping my marriage. The number one reason we don't have solar panels is because my wife says when they make them prettier, I'll get them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My wife is exactly the same way, Raj. To be quite honest, and that's the thing, that when you look at companies like Apple and Tesla, and you look at what they're doing, right? they didn't really develop all of these technologies, right? They figured out a way to integrate them, put them together in a package that's really compelling for people to use, right? Before the iPhone, we didn't know we needed an iPhone, right? And Tesla basically just came along and said, look, we can make batteries efficient and we can make what people want. We can make a nice looking car. Now they're getting to a price point that's a little bit more mass adoptable, but that's what they did. They didn't develop batteries. They didn't develop the idea of an electric vehicle, right? And so similarly, that's kind of how we're seeing ourselves. We kind of want to see ourselves as this kind of category leader, right? We're building a next generation, new type of generation window that hopefully doesn't give you any trade-off. It only gives you benefits. And so when we think about that, again, the aesthetics is a big deal. And a personal note is, we're doing some renovation at our home, and I've been wanting to forever put up solar panels. I think I really believe in the technology. I want to be more energy efficient. I can't get my wife to agree on the aesthetic. And no matter what I do, the only thing that I was able to show her is the Tesla solar roof. And that is still questionable, right? So, but Windows, she loves Windows. And I've showed her what we're developing and she's seen it. And, we've done a number of installations around the country and around the world now that people can actually go and see our windows. And you can see they look like traditional windows, but they're actually, transparent solar panels. And we think that's really been the missing key for adopting wide scale, solar technologies onto vertical surfaces of not only buildings, but also automotive as well.
Well, when you get your windows in, send me photographs so I can get mine in too.
Yeah, we'll do.
So you mentioned earlier, you've been with the company 6 years. Looking at your background, it seems like you'd be spoiled for choice for places to work. What's your why? What drove you to join Ubiquitous Energy and join the mission?
To be quite honest, and this is a little bit of a story, when Ubiquitous Energy was reaching out to me, I was, I'm always of the mind that I never shut down any conversation. You never know what's going to lead to what, and just let's see how things play out. And so I'm always open to having new discussions, new conversations about literally almost any topic. And so, I was talking with them for a while, and I said, "Look, I'm really happy with what I'm doing. I think I'm making a pretty big impact at the company I am, the previous company I was at, and so." I was really happy. And so I had no motivation or no reason to leave. So they were pretty persistent, and they made some compelling rationale for me to just come stop by. We know your commute to work. We know from our discussions where you live, where your office is now. Just stop by for 15, 10 minutes, right? And just see what we're doing and see and meet some of our people. And boy, am I glad I did, right? As soon as I met the team and a couple of the founders who are still with the company, immediately I was just like, okay, I know exactly why I need to be here. And really, it was seeing this technology that was incubated at a university like MIT, just starting to get its feet out into what I call the real world, out of academia, but then still early enough to really needing a lot of direction and a lot of figuring out of how can we actually deploy this technology on a commercial level. And so, that's something that I was doing at my previous company, where there, we developed some novel display technology that made, displays much more energy efficient, like what we have today in terms of, TVs and phones and laptop screens and all this stuff. And so I really enjoyed that path of taking a technology and seeing it from an academic setting, getting it into out of academia, for the most part, transitioning it into trying to make a business out of it. And so I really enjoyed that journey, if you will, from kind of lab to market. And so with any new hard technology or material science or chemistry related technology, it doesn't happen overnight. That's the one downside I will say, especially living where I live here in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, software successes seemingly seem like they happen overnight. Material science and chemistry successes don't happen overnight. They oftentimes take several years to decades, right? And so I did see that path and successfully at the previous companies that I was at, like I said. And I saw the same thing, potentially opportunity at Ubiquitous Energy, but in a different field. And, becoming a little bit more conscious with the times around climate change and impact of, what we can do, I really felt strongly about, deploying more solar technology around the world. And, it was a novel concept that I never even really knew was possible, to be quite honest. I kind of thought like, hey, this must be some kind of, whacked out, science experiment that somebody thought up in a lab at MIT one day, but they're never going to be able to do it, right? It sounded too good to be true. And the more I dug into it, the more I just got enamored and was like, okay, I got to be part of this. I got to be part of this journey to get this technology out to the market, because I believed in it so much. So I just wanted to be, part of that journey and, provide my background and expertise in any way that I could to kind of help it make it into a reality.
Why do you feel strongly about seeing solar energy deployed around the world?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, there's number of things I could throw at you, but one thing I throw at you is, all of our energy consumption, all fossil fuel, all this stuff, it could be completely eliminated if we had just mass deployment of solar technology, right? There's every day at any given time, I might get the stat wrong, but it's mind-boggling. There's enough energy from the sun that's hitting the surface of the earth literally at any time to power our whole global society, I think 100 times more than we need to. So, you might have heard of things like, well, if we just built, this solar array somewhere out in the desert that covered like the state of, Arizona or Nevada, we could literally drive, all of our energy needs. And so to me, it's like, it's mind boggling that we have technology like this and that it's not so widely deployed yet, right? And it's not used everywhere, right? And so when you start to dig into it, you start to understand, well, yeah, people don't really like the way, for their home, traditional solar looks. They don't want to put it on the roof. They want to put it out somewhere in a field or in a farm where, it can't be seen. Well, then you got to kind of distribute that. You got to route that energy, right? And so, it's like you're trying to do something good, but then you're creating hurdles to make it happen, right? And so I really believe in the just general technology of solar, but it's got to be deployed more broadly. It's got to be everywhere, and that's really what's behind, our mission and our vision is to really deploy this technology everywhere so that, globally from a equity standpoint, not just for a select few or a select building or anything like that, but everybody should be able to use technology like this to make, their lives better, reduce their reliance on energy, either from the grid or fossil fuels or things that are not, environmentally friendly or clean, but they should be able to do it, on their own, right? We should have buildings that are powering themselves, have enough energy so that they could distribute energy if needed to adjacent buildings or things like this, right? Our home should be built in a way that's powering itself, just like electric vehicles now are powering themselves, right? Of course, you have to have the other infrastructure around in terms of energy storage and batteries and things like this. But we are more than capable of developing an ecosystem and society that's completely run off renewable and clean energy. And so, I do strongly believe in that, not to go down the whole rabbit hole of climate change and the impact it's having. I think unless you've been living in a box, I don't think anybody can deny this anymore. And it's happening much more rapidly than, experts have been thinking about and modeling. And so, the time is now, right, for us to do things like our technology and a host of others, right, to help us reach our global, goal of getting to that, net zero and positive energy from renewable and clean energy alone.
I agree. Now, earlier you mentioned the path to commercialization. What are a couple of hurdles or challenges that you've experienced on this path?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's so many, right? And I think with every industry or industrial sector, it could be quite different. I'll give you my perspective from, trying to crack into what I would call the glazing glass/window industry. It's generally part of the building materials industry, right? So materials that go into construction for building, whether it's a new home, a new school, a new building, a new office park, whatever it may be, right? So think about it from that perspective, building materials, right? There's cement, there's concrete, there's glass, there's other materials, there's roofing, all this stuff, right? So this industrial sector in general, if you think about it from that perspective, like building materials, is what I would consider, for coming from my perspective, again, more from a advanced technology, Silicon Valley kind of type person hat. It's really risk averse and really slow to adopt to new things and to change. And so that's obviously a big challenge for a company like ours and a technologies like ours to get adopted into that ecosystem and supply chain that has been built over such a long time that they have the not only the feeling and the belief, but it's been proven through their historical track record. They know what they're doing. They know, the ins and outs. They know the financial returns. They know the impacts. They know all the things, and they're just not willing to make a big change or a big risk, if that makes sense, like a bet. And so that's obviously a big challenge. And so, it's really educating and working with this ecosystem so that we can integrate ourselves and work together with them. And really that's our whole, philosophical mantra of how to get this technology to the market, is really not to be Ubiquitous Energy, the end all be all company that's developing the technology, developing the supply chain, manufacturing ourselves, selling it and distributing it globally ourselves, because, we're not that company. We don't have ambitions to be that, multi-billion dollar behemoth organization from an investment side just to get that to happen. And so we want to work with the industry that already exists, in part because of the things that we're developing. We've been developing it from a perspective of, and a philosophical development perspective of, the existing industry can continue to do what they're doing, but they can easily and seamlessly, hopefully, integrate our technology as part of their manufacturing supply chain in a way that doesn't really require them to completely change the way they do things. And that's the way we really believe that we're going to get the fastest and most broad adoption of a technology like ours, is by working with this existing ecosystem and industry that, again, is relatively risk averse and is, really slow, and rightly, from their perspective, rightly slow to adopt change, because they've all had some experience where they've tried to do something completely different and have gotten really, negative results or bad results kind of as a result of doing so. If from our perspective, then it just makes it more difficult, right, to commercialize and get it broadly adopted, because we're by design wanting to work with this industry, this ecosystem, educate them on what we're doing, what we're offering, how we can provide value to them. Because at the end of the day, this can't be just in it for Ubiquitous Energy. It's got to be in it for the whole industry, and how we can positively improve not only what they're doing and have a positive impact, but then they're able to have a further positive offering to their supply chain, to their customers, to their distribution outlets, so that it eventually hits these end consumers, whether it's me and you buying new windows for our home, or whether it's for, the next company moving in and building a new building in an office park, so that they're able to understand what the options and availability are, and how much of an impact they can make. Because one thing, I'll be honest, Raj, when I talk to a lot of people about, specifically about, energy efficiency, climate change, and what can we do to offset, carbon emissions, a lot of times I hear people say, I don't know what I can do. Me as one person in the whole world, what choice can I make? What kind of impact can I have really on, global carbon emissions? Well, there's a lot of things you can do, right? It's making choices like, adopting new technologies that are more energy efficient. It's, instead of having traditional windows, have windows like ours that create renewable energy. Just by making that small choice yourself, as an aggregate, when more and more people do this, right, it's an economies of scale kind of factor that starts to happen, right? It exponentially starts to go. And so every single person that has a decision making power, I would say, right, whether that's your wife or whether that's you for new windows or solar panels for your home or whatever, right? Everybody can make conscious decisions that are going to impact carbon emissions, which again then impacts climate change and all these kind of things. So that's what's really, as you can tell, I'm passionate about it and really exciting for what we're doing, and really motivates us to really keep going and get this out there as quickly and as widely as we can.
I can absolutely tell your passion. And you mentioned impact. Let's move into the future. It's 2030. If Forbes or Business Week were to write a headline about ubiquitous energy, what would you like it to read?
I would like it to. It's a really good question, by 2030, I would like it to read that, Ubiquitous Energy is leading the wave for integration of renewable energy technology across the board, and hopefully showing the impact that it's made for, buildings, for windows, for homes and commercial buildings, automotive for sure by then. But then also, I think from a sustainable, supply chain side, in terms of water and food, that's an area that, we believe we can make an impact on. And, those are resources that we're going to have to come up with sustainable ways to make sure are still there, for our generation, our kids' generation, and future generations. So I think in short, a headline would be, Ubiquitous Energy is helping pave that path for just global sustainability, across the board.
Sounds like a beautiful vision. Now, my last question, and we kind of started out with advice with the Dale Carnegie and the confidence, etc. But if you could share some advice or words of wisdom, recommendations with the audience, and it could be professional or personal, what would it be?
One thing I would really implore people to do is, educate yourselves and just seek out things that you don't know, or just seek out, new conversations with people you might not normally talk to. It's a big Silicon Valley and team building and creative innovation thing, right? To get different people from different backgrounds in a room to create something, right? And that's where studies have shown a lot of innovation happens. And, that's one thing that I think has been somewhat missing since the pandemic has hit is, we've all kind of been, for the most part, been regulated to video conferencing, Zooming, things like that, telecommuting, all this kind of stuff, right? And I think it's really important that we kind of keep the other perspective and keep this other side, that hopefully it's not always going to be this way. We are able to get back in person together, as it makes sense, and just, foster that innovation, that creativity, because that's really what's going to lead to solutions that still haven't been thought of for the problems we still have, right? And so I would, my one piece of advice is just implore people to educate yourself, and, either by doing your own research or talk to people that you might normally talk to, right? I always find it pretty fascinating, and you're always able to take away something positive or learning from talking to people from different backgrounds, right? Whether that be from a different discipline, whether it be, an attorney or investment banker or a technologist or an accountant. There's always something that you can learn, because obviously people have their different perspectives on what they know, what they've seen when they're talking about any particular topic or issue. And so, again, a little bit selfish here, but education and awareness is really important, I believe, especially with new things, new technology, new way of doing things. And oftentimes it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, change is uncomfortable, but that education and awareness that, the intent behind some of these things is really positive. It's not negative at all. And it's getting people to understand each other, right? And so I that would be my one piece of advice. Explore, talk to people, reach out, because oftentimes people are more than willing to help, talk about things and help people out. And so that's definitely one piece of advice. I would suggest, Raj, the audience to really take to heart, especially in the kind of environment we live in now. I know it's a lot harder to do, but we still have cell phones. We still have phones. People still pick them up. People still talk to each other on the phone. It doesn't even have to be over a video conference, right? So I would really encourage people to do that.
Veeral, I think talk to people is a great place to leave off. I look forward to continue to watch your journey with Ubiquitous Energy, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Raj, and I really enjoyed the conversation today, and especially for having me on and taking the time. I had a great time, and I hope you stay well and safe.
Thank you, Veeral. Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. And you can show your support by sharing our show with a friend, or reach out to us on social media, where you'll find us under our Nexus PMG handle. If there's a subject or topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email, btu@nexuspmg.com, or contact me via our website, nexuspmg.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, where we share what we're reading and thinking about in the clean tech, green tech sectors. Bigger Than Us is a Nexus PMG production.